Okay, welcome to 2030. I'm your instructor, Jackie. So let me just go through a bit more administrative issues over here, and then we talk about the course, okay? So let me just go to some slideshow, and then I'll show you the website in a moment, okay? Let's go over some administrative issues here. How do you call me? If you want to call me professor, that's okay, but I do prefer just call me Jackie, that'll be fine, okay? And then this is my office, 2043 La Somme building, second floor. And my office hours starting from next week. Sorry, not today, okay? Starting from next week. 4 to 6 p.m., Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays. Or if you really cannot make it, or you want more time from me, send me an email, make appointments. Anytime you need advice from me, talk to me as early as you can. We're gonna cover some difficult stuff for many of you. So speak to me as early as you can. That's the best strategy. And throughout the semester, if you find this another way I can teach or teach more to help your learning, do suggest to me. I'm always open to suggestions, okay? Course information. So now there are actually, okay, this is the #1 important website, okay? So go to my webpage, I'll show you how to get there, very easy. Go to eecs.yorku.ca/tell.jackie, okay? That's my homepage. There is a tab over here called lectures. Go there, and then let me make it a little bit bigger. There's a link for 2030 over here, so we have some background study here. I'll go over that in just a moment. And also some tutorial for you to study. And I attempt to record every lecture entirely for a reason, which I will explain in just a moment, okay? I will post all the study materials in this website for you to study, okay? I'll try to make it happen after class every time, okay? That's the main site you want to go into to refer to slides, recordings, study materials, etc. Okay? And then let me go back to slides here. And there are 2 Moodle sites you have to be aware of. When you log into Moodle, so the #1 is the 2030 for 2019 to 2020. Okay. So that's the merge Moodle site for all the sections, for section A, B, C, and E. Okay? So this is where the lab instructions are posted. And by the way, lab 0 has been posted. Okay? So you may want to start it right away. Okay? You have to complete it in the prison lab, 106 in the La Somme building. And this is the second one, which is only specific to this section, section B. Okay? You can also go in there. So what's the purpose of that? I'll mainly use this Moodle to send out announcements specific to our section. If I got any test materials, if I got any, maybe the recording is now up on YouTube, I will let you know. Okay? So, and also, let me see anything else. Okay, and there is a Q&A forum over there on the section B Moodle. Feel free to post course-related questions there. The only rule is never ever share lab solutions there. You'll be prosecuted if you do that. Okay? Academic honesty is really important. Okay? Okay, check your email regularly, please. Okay? Any important announcement, you don't want to miss them. Okay? For those of you who are not enrolled yet, you might be on the waiting list. This is what I suggest. #1, you want to send me an email as soon as you can. It's jackie@eecs.yorku.ca. That's my email. Send an email to me with your name, student number, your passport ID. Just tell me you want me to give you access to the Moodle so you can look at the lab instructions. Okay? But you still want to attend the lectures. Assume that eventually you will get through the waiting list and get to my section. Okay? Attend the lectures and also complete all the labs. There'll be no extension. So no excuse, something like I enrolled in the course late. Can I have extension on the lab? No. Straight no. Okay. Class protocol. You guys seem to be very good so far, right? Compared with 1021, it's much, much, much better. Okay. I really appreciate that. However, please, no talking. Try not to use any mobile. It's very disrespectful and distracting to not just myself, but everybody else. If you really have to talk, leave, okay? You guys seem to be okay, so I'm just saying that. It's a protocol, the only protocol in the class. However, in the class, usually I will mainly talk about the core concepts and also example. I will go through example very thoroughly with you so that I can get you interested in the subject so you can study more. However, the remaining parts of the lecture notes, tutorials, and other things, it will be up to you. You have to study by yourself, and then any questions, talk to me. Okay, that's kind of the circle you want to go through. And speak to me early when you have trouble. It's simply not possible for me to go through all the slides. You simply don't want me to read off the slides. That's not useful to you, okay? I'll try to do another way. Okay, study tips. So now here comes the critical thing. You might think, wow, since Jackie put all the recordings on the web, should I skip the class then? Well, I would say you don't want to regret your position. No, don't do it, okay? So it's not meant to be a replacement for the classes. So how should you really make use of the recording? The reason that I'm trying to make recording is you don't have to worry about missing any information I say or write in the class. It will be recorded and posted anyway. Focus on listening to what I say. Try to reach maximum comprehension. That's really my intention, okay? Of course, sometimes you may have to miss the class for some legitimate reason, in which case you can refer to the recording, okay? And do ask questions. I welcome all the questions. Sometimes questions can also help me try to strengthen what I just said, okay? And also, you can feel free to take notes, even though they're incomplete. They will help you when you watch a recording, should you want to. They can help you study. Okay, any questions so far? We okay? Okay, and general tips about studying CS. You guys only second year, right? You only finished 1012 and 1022. I just want to give you a little bit my personal perspective about if you want to study CS, what should be the tips, okay? I do have some tips for you, okay, in day one. To do well, hard work is important. However, hard work doesn't guarantee success, I'm afraid, because computer science is a subject that requires creativity. And how can you get kind of creativity? You have to practice a lot. How can you practice a lot? You need to have some passion about the subjects. Okay, that's something I want to mention. And if you simply tell me at the end of the day, I did all the labs, I went through every bullet points of your slides, I watched all the recordings, I tried to do every exercise you told me to do, but I'm still failing. It's actually possible. I'm not saying it's impossible, but that might be that you're missing a critical step, which is to reflect on the subjects. So every time you're learning something new, or we have learned a lot of subject, let's say in the middle of the semester, you want to think back to see how everything connects together. There are many things that simply connected together. You always want to think on your own, okay? Okay, reflect is really important. So I want you to be curious about doing extra exercises, not just the ones I assigned to you, but also try to do a little bit more on the web. There are lots of learning resources on the web for Java. For example, if you click on the link, go to a website called Coding Bet. They got lots of examples over here for you to practice array, logic, or later on recursion. So this will be a nice learning resources for you. You can start with that, okay? And then you want to be curious about how things work the way they do, right? Whenever I explain why something works and why something doesn't work, you always want to remember the reasoning. You don't want to memorize the code. That's the last thing you want to do in a programming course. You want to know the reason, okay? Okay, so now, any one of you is taking 2001, EECS 2001 at the same time. Any one of you? Okay, just a little bit, that's okay. So, this is something new I added just this year because based on what I observed in the past years, I want to somehow make it a little bit more precise how you're supposed to do at least in order to succeed in this course. Actually, not just in this course, but in every CS course. I want to show you a diagram, okay? Here's a diagram over here. This is the so-called state diagram. Okay, I'll guide you through, don't worry. Okay? But for those of you who's going to study 2001, that's part of what you're going to study. Basically, it's about how you can survive in the course. Okay? Imagine that you're starting right here. This is today. There are 3 components that they are scheduled. You have to do at least. Lectures over here. And make sure you really focus. If you simply come to a lecture but just check your mobile, that doesn't count, right? That'll be about 15% what I expect from you. Okay? And then there will be tutorial videos. For example, remember back earlier in the summer, I sent a pre-study materials for you. If you haven't done that, that's okay. You know, you can start from today. It's still not too late yet. But you gotta study the tutorial video assigned to you. They will be covering the test. Okay? If you really try to focus on the tutorial videos rather than playing with 10 times of speed, just guide it through and then just see the code. That's not the way to that works. Okay? You really want to see what I really said in the tutorial video. And then for the labs, I'll talk about the grading component for labs. Your labs do not count much in terms of the weights. However, you want to make sure you really understand what you're doing. If you get too much help from your friends or from the TA, that's not exactly your work. That wouldn't help you too much when you actually do the computer-based test, okay? That's why when you do the labs, make sure you're just being honest to yourself. Really, if you really got stuck, talk to me or talk to the TA, okay? If you collected all three together, if you somehow less than 30%, well, I would say it's very likely you wouldn't make it. Okay, that's just my experience. But let's say you really have made it through. Okay, I forgot this. It's more than 30%. So now this is an important stage. Remember I said inspiration is actually more important than perspiration. So now this is the stage you really want to pay more attention to. Once you have done all the basics, you always have to think about how the program works, why they work, why do they not work. And always think about what I say when I do the reasoning in the lecture or in the tutorial. Okay, so now you can refer to the recordings. You can also talk to me. Okay, it's a process. Okay, once you have done that, I would say it's most likely you will succeed. Most likely. Okay, of course, sometimes it could be that just didn't work out. I'm just telling you based on my experience. Okay, any questions? But I would say if you really follow through whatever I suggested, you should be okay. Right? If you really find that you spend lots of time on the course, but the performance simply doesn't reflect what you have put in, speak to me early, and then I'll try to help you with maybe altering your study pattern. Okay, that's something I want to give you in terms of the tips. Okay, let's talk about lab test. I'll go through some syllabus component in just a moment. Just bear with me. So there will be lab tests throughout the semester. There will be 2 lab tests and 2 with so-called mini lab tests. I'll explain the difference in just a moment. Okay. But basically, for the lab test, I will give you study materials prior to the lab test. And since we got 4 different sections, so it's going to be slightly different lab tests, but the coverage will be similar. Okay? But you just study my study material, you should be okay for the lab test. Okay? And something I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit more later. But in the case where you are required to write Java code, here is a stringent requirements we have. You are now 2nd year, and you are supposed to be more proficient on Java. If you're not, study tutorial to compensate that. In the test, you're going to submit Java code for grading. Compilation is really important. What do I mean by compilation? When you open up Android Studio, if you got any syntax or type errors in your Android Studio, you simply cannot build your mobile app. Agree? Similar, we're going to use a different IDE called Eclipse. If you got any red underline in Eclipse, that means you got some syntax or type errors. That means your code just cannot be interpreted by the computer. Any compilation issue you have, doesn't matter. Even a single miss, even missing a single semicolon in your code, you got compilation error. You got 0 for the lab test. I want to make it clear to you. Okay, but you still got time to get prepared, right? So get prepared early. Okay, in day 1, I want to make it 100% clear to you. In the lab test, we do want you to take responsibility of your code. The TA or myself, we are not going to look into your code manually. We're just going to write some automated test. If your code doesn't compile, the automated test just cannot be run. You get 0. Okay, it's that simple. Okay, but if you're don't panic. So you just have to do whatever I try to prepare you to do. Okay, academic integrity, you can read this through. Basically, for labs, you might be, just check the lab 0 instruction. You might be able to work in pairs, but you're not supposed to copy your code over from other teams. Okay, basically that's what it means. Okay, let's go over the course syllabus. I'm going to upload this course syllabus to our Section B Moodle page a little bit later today, but let me just go through some details with you. Okay, that's not here. Okay, syllabus, okay. So now, number 1 I want to go about is something I want you to pay attention to. If you look at the syllabus, sometimes I may forget to actually switch to iPad. Please remind me. It does happen. I'll try to remind myself, but I do forget sometimes. Okay. So now, here are the course learning outcomes for us to achieve for this course. Okay, I wouldn't really go much into detail. They wouldn't make sense too much for you right now, but I do want you to refer back to the course learning outcomes to think about why we're doing what we are teaching in the classes. Okay, so I want to say something very quickly. Mainly, CL01 is really important. Given a particular API, given the header of a method to tell you this method should return a string, and this method will take certain input value and should return something, right? That's what you will be given. You're supposed to supply the code, which will make it happen. And also, we're going to learn about how to do testing properly, okay? And also, we're going to learn about how to document implementation using JavaDoc. This one will be covered only briefly. It's more about good practice for you to implement. And also, aggregation and composition is really important. If you try to recall what you learned back in 1022, there is something called aliasing. If you forgot, that's okay. I'm going to review that briefly in the first week, maybe the second lecture. Also, we're going to talk about inheritance, which is some advanced topic, maybe towards the end of the, maybe in the second half of the course. And then we talk about recursion, which is also a very, very important topic. And linked list, tentatively we will, but if not, that's okay, right? And also more about recursion. Okay, that's kind of the learning outcomes we would like to achieve throughout the course. Make it clear to you. So do read them as we go through. I'll try to revisit them as we finish covering some topics. Okay, but just keep that in mind. Let's go to the actual syllabus. Okay, page 1, you got my information here. Oh, again, this is my email. Okay, got any issue, always send me the email in a timely fashion. I'll try to respond to you as soon as I can. Prerequisite, course description, you can read them. And CLOs, I just talked about. Okay, and also lecture and labs. Okay, for the 2 lab session, which will start next Tuesday, right? Oh, no, tomorrow. Oh, both Tuesday, sorry about that. So you'll be next Tuesday. So myself, I will try to go to every lab session, at least for the first half an hour. So if you do have any questions related to the lab exercises or about the slides or anything, just talk to me. I'll be there at least for the first 30 minutes. Okay, just find me always. Okay, attendance will be important. Okay, so you should really try to take responsibility and attend every lecture, every lab. And for the lab test, your code must submit compilable source code, otherwise it gets 0, as I said. Okay, I'll give you more details how you can achieve that. Okay, so now that's a grading scheme. So you're going to have lab submission in total 10%. The exact distribution for the percentages will be announced later. Okay, but in total you get 10% from the lab. You can see it's not very heavy, so that's why you want to be honest to yourself. Really try to do the work by yourself. Okay, so you can learn the most. So there will be 2 lab tests over here. Do you mind if I shut the door? It's a little bit distracting sometimes. If it gets too hot, let me know. I will open the door again. So these 2 lab tests over here, you will see in the schedule. These 2 lab tests are mainly programming. And the other 2 mini lab tests are mainly written. Written in the sense that you will actually type your answer in a text editor and then submit the answer. Okay, so that's the difference between lab test versus mini lab test. I'll say mainly. Okay, there could be some written question in the programming one, and there could be some programming question for the mini one. I'm just saying mainly. Okay, and now, of course, there'll be letter grade. You pretty much know it, interpretation. And this is the tentative topic schedule for every week. Okay, you can refer to it, but for example, you see lab 0 over here. So when I put lab 0, that simply means on this particular week, not really on Monday, because your lab session is on Tuesday. For this particular week, you're going to do lab number 0. Okay, that's what it means. And the due dates, you have to check the lab instruction to see when the due date is. And when you submit your labs, you submit electronically to our Prison lab server. You do not submit to Moodle. You do not email me about your submission. No. Okay, you gotta, and lab 0 actually guide you through the process of submitting. Again, if you've got trouble, speak to me. Okay, so that's all the labs, and then your first test for mainly written test will be September 30th. And your first main programming test will be October 7th, right? So now you got more than a month to really get yourself prepared to write compilable Java code, okay? Okay, you can look at other milestones yourself. Okay, that'll be it. Any questions so far about the course? Are we okay? Yes?
Can we log into the Prison Lab remotely?
You can log into Prison Lab remotely, yes. Okay, check the lab 0 instruction. There might be a link to show you if you can remotely log in. If no, send me an email. I'll try to include a link. There used to be a link. Maybe, I'm not sure, maybe Professor Ma, he removed it. I'm not too sure. Okay, yeah. One caveat for you. Even though you can submit your labs electronically, so do take into account accident. Don't try to submit remotely from your machine only 1 minute before the deadline. Maybe there's a blackout. Maybe something goes wrong on your computer. Submission wouldn't go through, right? You don't really want that to happen. Try to submit as early as you can. For every lab, you can submit multiple times. Only the latest submission before the deadline will be graded, okay? All right. Okay, lab sessions over here. Okay, as I said, I'll try to be there. Come to me, approach me, or drop by my office hour if you don't want to talk to me. Okay, so now, are we okay? These are more or less all the important admin issues I want to go walk you through. Anything I'm missing? I'll maybe mention that next time. Yeah, questions?
Is this that we have to complete lab 0 from the prison lab, so we can't complete it at home?
I would say because lab 0 requires you to do some Linux commands that's specific to prison lab. And also some commands you're going to use, you have to use them during the lab test, for example, submit. So I would say it's more recommended that you try to do at least lab 0 in the prison lab. That's more to your advantage. Okay. However, starting from the first lab number 1, you definitely can work on your own machine to work on Eclipse and then submit it electronically, remotely. That's fine. Maybe for lab 0, I would say stick with the prison lab. Yeah. Okay, good. Any more questions? Okay. So now we are trying to give you a little bit more context about how this course is supposed to transform you from the first year, right? How do we adapt from the first year? You guys had lots of fun in 1022, I suppose. When I taught 1021, we also program in Java, but the way we saw the programming effect is not on the Android tablets. We try to program some robot car and also LED lights, or maybe RFID sensor, things like that, like more the hardware. But for you guys, you can see some working app. I think that's pretty much lots of fun to get you engaged. However, first of all, the only way you could see the programming effects is by visualizing the app on the tablets, right? To see if the app actually works. That's the main way. How many of you actually have done a little bit testing? For example, you might just define a class with the main method, and then I'm simply creating some objects over there and try to see some outputs on the console. How many of you actually did that on Android Studio? Some of you. That's okay. I understand that. That's okay. If you did that, that's very awesome. However, I do want to point out that is not how a real software developer would do their job. Okay? So now I want to point out 2 things. The main reason we are doing Android Studio for the first year is because we want to get engagement from you. We want you to get interested in the subjects. But now in the second year, we do want you to get more mature. Okay? The number 1, always visualizing the programming effects on some physical device, like a tablet, is not the way to go. You want to be as simple as just give you the specification. I'll give you the header of the method, and then just tell you how it's supposed to work, and you just program. And the way you see the programming effects, you have to do a little testing to see the programming effects. That's number 1. And number 2, simply use the main method to print out the object value is not the way to go. Guess what? Every time you make a change to your program, you have to rerun your Java application and then type in manually using your hands into the keyboard, right? That's too slow. What if you got 100 different input values to test every time? You got to type 100 times every time? That's not the way to go. Okay, we're going to show you a framework called JUnit testing. Okay, that's something we'll see. Okay, so we want you to really get used to these 2 things. Okay, try to read this slide maybe a little bit, maybe a month from now, so you will see why we are really trying to do the transition for you. Okay, and this is something I also want you to also train you. In my class, I usually try to explain to you what's the reasoning behind every example. So you really want to think beyond the example, so you can recreate other examples. Right? You want to think abstractly. If you want to see some example, for example, if you want to have an interview with Google, right? You can click on the link. There's a YouTube video over there. How they do interviews at Google is they don't want you to sit in front of a computer and program. They might simply ask you to go to the blackboard and then give you a problem. How do you reverse an array? Program that on the blackboard. Okay, but you better make sure whatever you write actually makes sense to your interviewer, right? Yeah, so that's something I want to motivate you a little bit. The reason we are doing 2030, which is so different from 1022, is because we want to prepare you the mindset for later. Okay, what is this course about? Okay, it's mainly about solving problems. Okay, and we want to use object orientation. Well, it's advanced object-oriented programming course, so we want to use object orientation. So we want to use classes, attributes, methods, all this kind of stuff to actually define your solution. And then we want to use also loops, if statements, assignment. We want to combine everything together. Okay, and then express your solutions in Java. So only this part alone, object orientation and procedural programming, they exist in many other programming languages, like a C# or C++. However, for this course, you have to write your solution in valid syntax of Java. Okay, so 2 points. Number 1 is more important than number 2. However, to get credits for your lab test, you also need number 2. Okay? Good. Okay, so now final reminder before I go to our first lecture. So if you need any accommodation, please get in touch with me, either in person or email. Okay, I'll try to see what I can do. Okay, but get in touch with me as soon as you can. And again, if you're not enrolled in the course yet, do attend the lecture, but send me an email as soon as you can. And then I will add you to the Moodle. Okay? Guys, any questions? You okay, right? I hope you have not been terrified by me. I try to be as strict as possible in the beginning so that it wouldn't become as a surprise to you. Okay, yeah. Good. Very good. So now let's go to our first lecture. The first 2 to 3 lectures will be mainly about reviews of the basic object orientation. Okay. So for today, I want to cover some basics. If I can touch Eclipse, I'll try to, but otherwise I'll try to cover some very basics for you. Okay. I got about maybe less than 1 hour to do that. Okay. And the first lecture about classes and objects, and then I'm just going to do it. Okay, so now, first of all, I want to go through a checklist with you. Okay, don't worry, it's recorded. Okay, I'll also make the notes available to you. You don't need to write it down. But if you want to, that's fine. Okay, so now we talk about object-oriented programming. Okay, so this is more like a checklist of your understanding. Okay, we'll go through many of them in the review lecture. So now talk about what's really the difference between classes versus objects. The easiest way to think about it is classes are static. They're simply at the compilation time. It's before you try to run your program. Objects are whatever that's happening when you're running your program. Okay, that's the easiest definition. So sometimes we say classes are simply templates. They simply define attributes, methods. For the methods, we got 3 kinds of methods. We got constructor for creating new instances. We got mutator for with a void return type for modifying the object states for the attributes. Also, we got accessor for returning something, right? We'll have an example for you a little bit later. So now this is runtime for objects, okay? For the objects, basically, let's say if I define a template called person at the compile time, it's only a single class. However, at the runtime, I may choose to instantiate the person class to as many objects as I like. And every object possess the same attributes and possess the same methods. Okay, the same. However, because they're different objects, so let's say I try to call the method, let's say get tuition on different student objects. Student 1 may get a different tuition back than student 2, right? Because they're different objects. Okay, you can call the constructor to create objects and also use a dot notation. The dot notation is also very important. Okay, I'll try to review a little bit as well. Okay. Okay, for example, if you got a person object P dot, let's say, get tuition, right? That's a simple case, of course. That's a simple case. in theory, you may have something like this. Let's say person has an attribute called spouse, which is also another person. If I say p.spouse, that's a valid syntax in OO. What does that mean? p.spouse. Well, thinking in normal terms, right? Wouldn't that just be P himself, herself, right? Okay, that's something I'll try to explain to you by visualizing it. I just want to mention that quickly to you. If all these simply don't make sense to you, you better study the tutorial. Okay, I'm just trying to touch that a little bit. Okay, okay, that's a very quick checklist, and also you can call the accessors or mutator, okay, as you wish. Okay, after this, I'm going to go for some slides, and then we'll go back to iPad. Okay. Okay, so this is the tutorial series I sent to you earlier in the summer. But again, if you haven't got time, that's okay. It's now the time to start. Today is day one. Okay. If you go to the tutorial, if you click on the link, there are many videos over there. Okay. These are the videos I created for 1021 when I taught them. The good thing is it's completely compatible with you because you're going to use Eclipse. They also use Eclipse, so it's completely applicable to you. Just to tell you, if you want to review basic programming and Eclipse or if statements, loops and arrays, and also classes and objects, I would say starting from 34 are the most important ones. You want to review the basics of OO, okay? And also a complete example. We'll touch a little bit on that. But I'm gonna rely on you because that's something I can assume you actually learned that in 1022. If you haven't, study the materials and then talk to me. Also, you can see the iPad notes for the video from this link. Okay, so I would say start today with the resources. Okay. So after this, I'm going to go to this. So now let's talk about like a separation of concern. Okay, basically, let's talk about in 1022. Okay, in 1022, you basically have maybe one. I think most likely just one class, or maybe sometimes two. You got one or more Java classes without the main method. So those classes are so-called model, or they're simply something that you want to create instances out of. Okay, person, bank, or I don't know, rock, paper, scissors, right? Just some classes over there, and like that. And another class would be the so-called tester class. So that's the class with the main method. Okay, let me show you a diagram over here on the iPad. Okay. If you look at that, so this is some diagram you want to remind yourself. We're going to modify this diagram a little bit for the purpose of this course, but the layout is in general similar. Okay? Number one, you can see under the model. Model, I just call it model because it's more like a model of your application. Okay? You may have one or more classes. You can have as many classes as you like. Okay? For example, I might have person, I might have students, I might have another class called bank. As many classes as I like. And we have something so-called tester. And the tester is going to make use of some or all of the classes in the model package. Okay? And then the main thing about it is the tester has the so-called main method, which means when you're trying to run your Java class as a Java application, this will be the entry point of execution. Entry points of execution. That means you're going to execute this line by line. Maybe the first line, try to create an instance of type person. The second line, try to call the person, maybe try to call the method get tuition from the person, right? You can have as many usages as you like in the main method. Okay, that's a general architecture. Okay, are we okay so far? Okay, later on, we are going to keep the model side pretty much the same. What we're going to change later is to give you a better alternative. Later, we'll change this particular tester to JUnits test class. Okay, I will elaborate this when we get there. Okay, maybe in about 1 week. Okay, we'll talk about JUnits. It's very cool, actually, modification to the tester. But for now, for the purpose of your exercises, when you study the tutorial, if you know how to use the main method to test your objects, that's sufficient. Okay. Okay. So now let's go back over here. Okay, we got a simple controller. For example, I think in Android Studio, they got a convention, it's called activity class, right? If I recall correctly, okay? Okay, and then you simply just visualize on your tablets, or you simply try to print to the console, right? That's basically what you would do in 1022. But now, okay, let's talk about in Java. Okay, in Java in general, we may define more than one classes, okay? In the truth of the matter is, for example, later on you will study a course called EECS2030, software design. Over there, we try to expose you to the more or less the reality. You might have to deal with maybe dozens or maybe tens of classes or even 100 classes. They somehow interact with each other in certain way. But in 2030, we try to show you maybe up to 5 classes, but at least you want to see how things work in a small scale. So you will be able to generalize it to a more difficult context. Okay, each class may contain more than one methods. Okay, and then now what about object-oriented programming? Okay, so we use classes to define templates, also use object to instantiate classes, right? Okay, so now I'm going to deviate from the slides a little bit. I'm just going to use my iPad to do some examples with you. Okay, however, over the weekend before the next lecture, I'll give you certain reading assignments. How about that? There's no textbook for this course, fortunately. So all you got to do is to do the slide studying as I assign. So I'll give you the slide number to study up to over the weekend. Okay. Now I'm gonna focus more on the iPad to give you examples. Okay. So now let's first of all talk about what's really the overall idea about object orientation. So all of you already have some certain experience on object-oriented programming, but I want to explain from a bird's eye view about why object orientation could be useful. Okay? So now this is what I call, I'll try to make it a little bit larger over here. It's called 3 stages: observe, model, and execute. Let me explain the process first, and then I'll try to exemplify that. Okay? Observe simply means we try to observe the real world to see what entities, for example, students, professor, faculty member, desk, classroom, door, blackboard, right? Every entity might be a candidate to be defined as a Java class in Eclipse, everything. However, each one to choose to define in the Eclipse is completely up to your application, okay? So now, for example, you observe, I got Jim, I got Jonathan, they are both persons, right? They have some certain things in common, in which case I can try to model them in Eclipse as a person class. And also talk about the 2-dimensional plane, right? How do you actually characterize a point? You may give the x and y coordinates, right? So let's say this guy here might be 2, 3, right? That's the x, that's the y. So every point in a 2-dimensional plane has 2 coordinates, x and y. That's what they share in common. So these are so many observations you can make. So before you try to develop your application, you should really observe exactly what's in the reality. Fortunately, in 2030, you're still kind of like beginning to learn about this kind of modeling process. We usually give you what classes you have to make. However, when you get to the 3rd year, for example, 3311 software design, we actually tell you what the problem you have to solve, but you have to come up with all the classes yourself. Okay, it's a different practice. But for now, for 2030, usually you will be given the classes that you have to create. Okay, but just keep in mind, it's usually not the case. No, your supervisor in your job wouldn't tell you what classes to create. They wouldn't tell you. You got to come up with yourself. Okay, the first phase is mainly about, let's say, just about observing. Let's say we have a person over here, Jim. Let's say he is 55 years old, and he's 1.81 meters high, let's say. We have another person here who's called Jonathan. And then, let's say he's 60 years old, and now, let's say he's slightly shorter, that is 1.78 meters. Right? That's a very valid observation, right? So now, what I do want to point out is this. You can see these 2 persons over here. First of all, they both have a name, agree? Both of them. However, the name for this particular person is called Jim. The name for this particular person is called Jonathan. Even though every person has a name, but their name value may be different. That's a critical insight into object orientation. Okay? So that means when you define a person class, you say every instance of the person should have name. However, their name value as a string may be different. Maybe Jim, maybe Jonathan, etc. Similarly, if you see another one over here, you can see 55 versus 60, right? And also you can see 1.81 versus 1.78. That is why if you try to do the following, let's say we have, let's say we have an object called Jim. Let's say we have done that, okay? Jim dot get BMI and Jonathan dot get BMI. Do you know what BMI is? Maybe from 1022, right? It's simply the weights divided by the square of heights, right? That's a formula. So now, both Jin and Jonathan, they are instances from the same class. So it's guaranteed they both have weights and heights. So it's guaranteed you can apply the formula to both persons. However, will the return values of these two expressions be the same? Not necessarily yes, not necessarily no. It depends. If they happen to have the same weight and height, it will be the same. If they simply don't have the same weights or heights, it will be different, right? So now, that's why I want to point out another term for you, okay? So now, when you look at the dot notation over here, right? Dot notation is really important when you do programming in Java. Jim and Jonathan here, right before the dots, these are so-called context objects. Context objects are really, really crucial in the sense that every time you're trying to make a method call, you want to see what the context objects are. Because every context object is of the same type. Let's say I have one context object of person, Jim. I have another context object of person, Jonathan. Even though they're both person, but you talk about different contexts. Jim and Jonathan have different weights and heights, different context. With different context, the computation for get BMI will simply be different. Okay, that's the insight, intuition. Okay, guys, are we okay? Can I take silence as a yes? Good. Now, that's about compilation time. Of course, you can do something similar for points, and then we got X and Y. Okay, you will see lots of examples like this throughout the course. Okay, so now the final stage will be execute. Execute simply means once you have done your Java class definition properly with a valid Java syntax, now you can start manipulate the objects of the class. What you can do is, at the runtime, I will explain the diagram a little bit later when I get to the actual example. So now, this will be my advice for this course. Maybe back in 1022, the objects you have to create, they were not that complicated. Usually just one class, so you don't need to draw any diagram. However, as I will show you in this course, normally you may have to work with 2 or 3 classes. You can easily lose track if you don't draw some diagram to trace your code. I think tracing the code is a very important technique to pick up in this course. Okay, I will give you lots of examples as we go through. Okay, but this is one way to actually visualize every object. Okay, let me just mention very quickly. Over here, you can see for every object, we simply draw a rectangle box over here. Okay, that's the name of the objects, Jim versus Jonathan. They are the objects of the same class, so that's why it's person. And then at the left column, we put all the attributes. You can see the same attribute for both person, right? Name, weight, and height. At the right column, we give the actual values for the attributes. For example, both persons have the name attributes. However, their names are simply different. Jim versus Jonathan. Right? You can see that. That's the well, to me, that's the most intuitive way to trace your code. We'll see application of that. Maybe on next Monday when we do the lecture. Okay? Okay, that's about this process over here. I'm going to make the diagram available to you and also the notes. So do think, I want you to really revisit this diagram for as many times as you can as we go through the course. It's really important to keep the big picture in your mind. Okay, that's the biggest advantage for doing OO. Okay, okay, a little bit of basics over here. So now, whenever you're given some informal description of the problem you're trying to solve, basically you have to do some conversion to think about what part of the description of the problem can be turned into a class name, and what part should be turned into a method name, right, etc. Okay, But most of the time, we'll give you the class name and method names anyway. But I think for your learning, I better tell you, give you some basic principle about how you can decide that, so you can do your own study. Okay? Basically, what you have to do is, let's say example. Let me just do one example. Okay? Let's say example number 1 together. Okay? You can see the other one in the slides. Okay? So now, can you just spend 30 seconds reading this passage here? Just example 1. Read it quickly. Are we good? All right. Let's say this is the problem I would like you to solve in Java. Now, you want to decide which part should be turned into classes, which part should be turned into methods, and which part may be turned into attributes. All right? So now, this is a guiding principle. First of all, you want to identify all the critical. So here, critical can be a little bit vague. What do you mean by critical? That's something up to your judgment about what you really want to implement for your application. Okay? Let's say if you want to implement a BMI app, in which case maybe weight and height would be important, right? Things like that. Identify all the critical nouns and verbs. Okay, let's try. So now let's circle all the nouns. Person, being, human, attributes, behavior, personhood, a person, and also heights and weights. So these are all the nouns. Agree? Okay? So now I'm not being selective. I choose every noun. However, you don't want to create so many classes. That would be too much. You want to choose just some of them to actually for the purpose of your app. Okay? So now each noun might be turned into either a class or an attribute. That's usually that's basically the guiding principle. So now it will happen that I will decide this is the most important noun, person. I would say person is just almost the same as human. I could have created a class called human. That'll be okay, right? Okay, person and also heights and weights. Let's say we make that judgment. These are the 3 main nouns I want to identify. So now are those all going to be converted into classes? Do you want to have a class called heights or weights? Think if you want to ask yourself, to be a class, it's got to be a template for something. Person sounds more like a template because a person has many things that can be that has many characteristics. But for heights, what's the characteristic? Just a number. So it's very simple. So it doesn't really deserve to be a class. Okay. So now in this case, what we will get is so person. Oops. Okay. So now let me use the color here. So the person is going to be a class. And then these 2 will be attributes. Okay, something like that. Okay, and then finally, what about verbs? Can you see any verbs over there? Want to help me out? What's the verbs? How many verbs do you see? 2? Agree? Okay, let me circle that. Okay, let me use a different color here. Ages and also grows, right? So these are 2 verbs. It's kind of make it intentionally easy, right? So now that means ages and growth could be 2 different methods for your person class. So the person class has 2 methods. One would be for the person to grow, and one would be, to grow on their weight, and the other one for them to age. Okay, that's just a simple example. Anyway, so that's just mention that just so that you have an idea. Okay, you can see example 2 on the slides. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next one. Okay, now I would like to do an example with you. Okay, so I think we got about 30 minutes, roughly, okay, left. I want to do this very carefully because I want to mention every turn, as I go through the example, every turn you should know for this course, okay? And then over the weekend, you should really start the tutorial videos as well, right? It's actually much more thorough than what I can do in the lecture. I only got 90 minutes, what can I do, right? Unless you want to stay longer. No, maybe not. Okay, so let's now talk about the person class in particular. Okay, just person class. And then I want to show you maybe a little bit Eclipse as well. Okay, how about that? So now assuming that you're going to download Eclipse on your machine, I'm going to skip that step. So let me just go to Eclipse. Okay, let me see this. This is my iPad, and that's my Eclipse. Okay. Okay, that's the Eclipse over here. That's the latest version. The latest version has a very cool addition. So now you can simply get a shortcut to create a new Java project, which wasn't the case. Let's say you're using an older version of Eclipse. What you can do is simply go to File, New, Java Projects. The reason I'm showing you this in the class is because, oh, I forgot to mention, I do encourage you to bring your laptop to the class. That doesn't bother me. The reason is, if you find some ideas I just mentioned fascinating or simply a little bit puzzling, feel free to try out. Or when you actually study at home, always try to create projects yourself. I'll make all the example code I do in class available to you. Feel free to play with it, edit it, or extend it. That's really what I encourage you to do. Okay, so let's create a new Java project. Okay, let's do persons. Okay, just the project is called persons. And now to make things easy, I'm just going to create one class for person, the model, another one for tester. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. So now I can go for File, New, and then class. I will call that person. That's a template. Okay, there is certain things you can have over here to make your code generator a little bit more powerful. But I would say don't worry about it for now, just for illustration. But if you watch the tutorial video, I did show you something that's included in the Eclipse. One thing to note, remember this diagram over here? That we talk about, okay? So now when we define person class, it's one of the classes in the model, right? And then later on, we're gonna create a single tester in just a moment. Every class in the model side does not contain a main method, okay? So now let me go back there, and then person, so do not check this box for the main method, do not, okay? And then I'll say finish. Okay, I hope that's big enough, right? Okay, so now that's a person class, and then let's go there and then try to do some programming, okay? So what we have now, back to the iPad over here, is, okay, so you can see we are defining a class called person over here. Okay, that's a template. And then we have as many attributes as we like. And you can think about attributes are simply variables at the class level, okay? So they're outside the scope of all the other methods in the same class. So here we say we have one attribute age of type integer. We have another one called nationality of type string, and etc. Right? We got 4 attributes. What does that mean? That means when you trying to instantiate a person class at the runtime, every object of type person is going to store 4 pieces of information: name, age, nationality, weight, and height. Okay? That's exactly according to the definition. And then we have a constructor over here. That's kind of interesting. I will also show you a little bit trick. Well, something you should know if you program in Java. Over here, we're saying that there's a constructor here, and the name of the constructor must be the same as the class name. You know that. Good? And you can supply as many so-called parameters. So these are called parameters, input parameters. So I'm telling you, every time you're calling the person constructor, you must give me 1, 2, 3. 3 information. Okay? The first must be an integer, and the second must be the first one must be integer, the second one must be a double value with a possible floating points, and the third one must be another double. Okay? So now I want you to see input parameters versus actual arguments. Let's see very quickly how to apply this on the paper. Let's say we also create another class called tester with a main method. I'll create this class in Eclipse in just a moment, but let's see conceptually. Okay, this is the tester class. Let me use maybe blue. This is the tester, okay? And now inside the main method, we are trying to create 2 instances of the same class. One has a name, Jim. The other one has a name, Jonathan. Okay? And then every time, of course, if you see the new keyword, that means you are applying the constructor. So now, here's a very important point to clarify some terminology. Okay? When I say new age, new weights, and new heights, so these are called parameters. However, when you're trying to give input to them, there will be actual arguments. Okay? For example, 45, 72, and 1.72. So these are so-called actual arguments, or just arguments. To make it simple, for a single parameter that you define in the class, you may have as many possible actual arguments as you have at the runtime. Okay? So you can see a single parameter new age, at the runtime it has actual argument either 45 or 62 or anything. That's not negative. Is it clear? Okay? So that's a difference between arguments versus parameters. Okay? Because sometimes I do use the term parameters using versus arguments. So I want to make sure you know what I'm talking about. Okay, that's about, and over here, of course, we are trying to do assignments over here. Okay, so now we are simply doing some. I'll explain the assignment in details in just a moment. Okay, and then that's about the constructor. Let's do a little bit programming quickly. Okay, the first thing I want to do, I want to show you that even without writing an explicit constructor in your class, there will be a default constructor implicitly created for you. I want to show you that. Okay, let me illustrate that point. Okay, let's go back to Eclipse. Okay, and then I'm going to create a new, okay, I'm going to declare all the variables over here. So I got integer age, I got string nationality, and then also I got double weights, I have double heights. Okay, assuming that double, the weights is in kg, and also the height is in meters. Okay, make it easy. Okay, so these are the attributes. Okay, let me make some comments for you. Okay. Okay, and then let's say that's it. You can see there is no explicit constructor defined for this class. Agree? No explicit. But you can already creating instances of person class. How? Let's see. What's the best way to see how we create classes at runtime? Write a tester. Okay, that's the best way. So let's go back there, and then let's create another class over here for the tester, right? New, and a tester is simply a normal class, but with a main method. So check this box over here to say you want to generate with the main method here. And then you will say, give a name, of course. The name is really up to you, but typically, you want to make the name more informative. You can say person tester. Okay, and then we can say finish. So now we got two classes. Now, this person class has no main method, but this person tester has a main method, which means the only class that we can run as Java application, the only class we can run as Java application is the person tester. Okay, that's how you do it. You can simply right click and then say run as Java application. But we haven't done anything useful yet. Let's do something. Okay, this is the person tester. So now what I want you to try is, can we create person objects already, even though we don't have any explicit person constructor? The answer is yes. Default constructor. Person. Jim is new person. But what about the input parameters? How many input parameters should there be for the default constructor? 0. Okay? Takes nothing. And then I'll explain something more. Okay, new person, like that. And then person, Jonathan, is new person, also like that. Okay, you can see everything compile. So that's something you want to focus on from day one. Every time you're trying to program on the Eclipse, if there is any red underline, it's a no-no. You want to fix it right away. Right? For example, if accidentally you delete the semicolon and then you got an error over here, right? You can see there's a red underline over here, and there's a cross check over here. There's also a cross check on run a tab of the class. If you submit this code for grading, 0. Okay? Let's put it back. So now, Can anybody tell me what's going to be the consequence of creating these two objects at the runtime? What's going to be the consequence? Hmm? Well, actually, if you're able to create person objects, each one of them should have the age, nationality, weight, and height. They do exist. Okay? They will be there. They're not gone. However, the question is, what values will they have? Yes?
They'll essentially be pointing to the same thing, which is the default person.
Oh, no, that's not true. So that's good guess. What you're saying is, since we are using the default constructor, they should point to the same objects, Jim and Jonathan. That's not true. Okay, yes?
Would they be null?
You mean both Jim and Jonathan will be null?
No, the values for the...
Aha, good. So, however, it depends on what the type of the attribute is. If you talk about reference type, like a string, they will be null. If you say integer double, they will be 0, for example, right? Okay, let me illustrate this to you on Eclipse, and then I will give you a little bit more detailed illustration. So now, it's really important for you to know how to use the breakpoints and debugger at the runtime, okay? But now let me print out something for you first, before I try to do anything else. Okay, so now I can print out something to the console. Because Jim and Jonathan, the references themselves, they are not null. They really exist at runtime. So I can say system. You know, that's the only thing I like about Android Studio. Because if you say something like S out, it will complete this code for you, but not in Eclipse. Possibly. You mean for Eclipse?
I'll check it out.
Check it out. Let me know. And post on the forum. You know, that'll be for the benefits of everyone. Okay, good. Okay, so system.out.println line, and then I can say, for example, Jim, the context object start, and you can see Eclipse helps you complete the code. What attributes can you call on the person object? All the 4 that we just defined. Let me just say age versus nationality. Oh, actually, let me do another one. Because they're different types. Age is of type integer, weight is of type double, nationality is of type string. Okay? So now, as you suggested, we should get null, but only for line number 10. Line number 10 will get default value null for the reference type. Let's try. What I can do is I can right-click on person tester over here, run as Java application, and you will see over here, 0 comes from the default value for age. 0.0 comes from the default value for weights. Null comes from the default value for nationality. Okay? As you study a little bit further in the review slide, you will see what the default value should be for each type. Okay? That's a default constructor, which is not that useful. Okay? However, I do want to show you one thing here. Okay? So now there is something called debugger in Eclipse. And I would say treat debugger as your best friend for this course. Me, myself, only the second best friend. Okay? Debugger should be your best friend because I cannot be around you all the time. But your machine can be. Whenever you really get stuck, you're simply not too sure what's going on with your code. The best way to really trace the code and debug is by using breakpoints in debugger. Okay? Let me show you very quickly. You can see the more details on the tutorial videos. Number 1, set the breakpoints. Think about every time you're trying to execute your Java tester, it's going to execute line by line from top to bottom, right? Without any pause. But now the idea about breakpoints is I want the execution to pause at a particular point. Let's say I want the execution to pause right after I have created Jim and Jonathan using the default constructor. And I want to inspect to see how Jim and Jonathan should how they should look like. Do they exist? If they do exist, what should be the value for their attributes, right? Okay, how do you put the breakpoints? Just go beside the line. There's a blue bar over here, light blue, and then you simply just single click or double click to actually see the point, right? You can double click again to remove it. Now I put it back. Okay, that's the idea. So now I put the breakpoint at line number 8. That means next time, if I try to debug this particular Java application, execution is going to pause at line number 8 and allow me to inspect the current states. Let's see exactly how to do that. Okay, so now it's line number 8. So what I would do is right-click on the same class. Rather than saying run as Java application, you want to say debug as Java application. That's the critical difference, right? That means this particular execution is going to pause at the first breakpoints. If I say that, okay, the first time, don't worry about the red line here, it's not error, don't worry about it, okay? So now, it's the first time simply telling you. So there are two, I want to show you quickly, conceptually. There's also a common confusion. On your Eclipse, if you think about this is your Eclipse editor, right? So there are two perspectives. The first one is a Java perspective, and the second one is a debugger perspective. And usually the icon is right around here. I'll show you exactly. But if you're in the Java perspective, that means you're coding. You're just writing the code. As soon as you try to run the debugger, it's going to switch you to the debugger perspective, right? Two different perspectives. A very common mistake is when students run the debugger and they have switched the debugger perspective, but they forgot to come back. They got lost. They simply say, oh, what happened to my Eclipse? Should I reinstall my Windows? No, you don't have to. Just switch back to the Java perspective, right? Now, let's go back there. And then, okay, the first time it's going to ask you, would you like to switch to the debugging perspective? Yes. And I can say, remember my decision, so it wouldn't bother me every time. If I say launch, it's going to show me a different perspective over here, okay? You can see, first of all, line number 8 is now being highlighted, right? That means we haven't got anything in the console yet. Well, it's simply blank, right? So then nothing has been printed out just yet, simply because line number 9, line number 10 have not been executed just yet. We are just paused, okay? One thing to note, you can see around the right top corner, there's a button there. It's called debug. That's the debugger perspective I was talking about. If you want to switch back to the Java perspective, you can go to here and say Java perspective. Click on that. I'll click on that a little bit later. Okay? So now, I want you to focus on things over here. Okay? You can see over here something called variables and something called expressions. Variables and expressions. So these are what your best friend can do for you. At this point of the execution, it will tell you what the variables or object have been set up to. Okay? For example, I will show you variables first, and then I'll show you expression. They have different purpose. Okay? If you look at variables, you can see so far we have got one variable, Jim, and another variable called Jonathan. Okay? Now, a very quick test. I'll elaborate this a bit later. When I click on Jim, it tells me person at 34CE8AF7. Jonathan is person at B684286. Seems like a different strings, but can anybody tell me what these are? They are addresses. Very good. Okay, why they are addresses? I'll get there. I want you to know, when you click on Jim and Jonathan, they show you the value for these two object variables. However, they do not contain the age, nationality, weight, and heights themselves. It's actually indirect storage. Okay, something very important to note. Okay, and now how do you inspect the states of the objects? You can expand the variable. If you expand Jim, you will see, now we got age, heights, nationality, and weights. If you expand Jonathan, you got age, heights, nationality, and weights. And for now, they are simply set by the default constructor. Every value is simply default. So now Jim and Jonathan, they're different objects because they got different addresses, but they contain the same attribute values. Okay? Or make it more visual for you. What we have achieved right now is we have Jim over here is pointing to person. So we have age, nationality, and also we have weights, we have heights. Age is 0, no, 0.0, 0.0. That's Jim. And let's have another one, Jonathan. So now one of you were thinking that since we're calling the default constructor, they should point to the same object. No, they are not. Okay? They are pointing to different objects. So if I do Jonathan here, it's a different object, different address. Jonathan is pointing to just another box. Also person here, age, nationality, weights and heights, 0 null, 0.0, and 0.0. So now I have a question for you, okay? What happens if I try to evaluate this expression here? Tell me what it should be. If I say over here, Jim equals Jonathan. Is it valid? Well, usually what the simplest use case would be, you say 3 equals 4, right? But now if I say Jim equals Jonathan, can I do it?
It's evaluating addresses.
It's trying to compare the two addresses I read out in Eclipse, right? Okay, so that's something I will also try to talk about over the weekend. I mean, after the weekend, not over the weekend. Right? So now here, when you say Jim equals Jonathan, basically what you're doing is I'm comparing the address that is stored in Jim is equal to the address that is stored in Jonathan. No, they're not equal. So it's going to give me false. So now it really shows you it's really important to actually trace your code, because I'll get there maybe next week, okay? But it's a simple case. So whenever you do equals on the reference variable, it's going to compare the addresses. And the only way for you to get this right is by drawing some diagram to trace, okay? Okay, now that's about the default constructor, and also a little bit about breakpoints in debugger. One more thing about debugger. So now we look at the variables. I want you to show you cool things about expressions. Expression simply means write down any expression that makes sense at the current context, and then it will evaluate for you. For example, now, at this stage, what do I expect the age of Jim to be? 0, right? Default. I can verify that in the expressions. I can say, Jim has been created dot age, which should be integer, equals 0. That's a valid expression. Hit enter tells me true.
It's like an assert.
It's like an assert, yes. Basically, well, I tell you what, it's going to evaluate any valid expression you can put over here. It can be a Boolean. I could give you another one. Maybe for some reason, you want to know how old would Jim be next year, for example, right? So you can see Jim.age plus 1. It gives you 1, right? Because he's now currently 0 years old, right? That's the idea. So expression is actually very, very powerful stuff for you to really trace your code. I'll try to give you more example later when we talk about composition aggregation, okay? And think about how debugger can be used, how useful it could be. Let's say you're trying to write a very complex methods with nested loops and create 50 objects. If you're lucky, you get it right the first time. You don't have to worry about debugger. But most of us, we are not lucky at the first time. Debugger, okay? Guys, are we okay? Okay, good. Okay, that's about breakpoints and debugger. I think that this might be the only time I can show you very much in detail. If you really got trouble with this, talk to me, okay? Otherwise, I'm gonna assume you know how to do that. Okay, one more thing. When I want to terminate the debugging session, I can say the stop button over there. I can say stop, and now this is where many students got panic. Oh, where's my Java code? It's there, don't worry, okay? All you gotta do is to go to Java perspective over here. Now we are back, okay? You don't need to reinstall your Windows, that's fine, okay? Okay, now I want to spend a little bit more time over here. We got 5 minutes, right? Okay, let me make a logical pause over here after one more thing. I want to show you that default constructor is always there if there's no other constructor you define. However, default constructor is not that useful. You only give default values to every attribute for your objects. So now, typically, you do want something that's customized. For example, the one we have over here, right? Oh, sorry. The one we have over here. New age, new weights, and new heights. Okay, let me do that very quickly, and then we'll go from there next time. So what I would do is I'll go for person over here. So now I want to have a customized constructor. So now what I can do is I can say public simply means it's going to be usable by all other classes. Public and then the same name, okay? So now I'm going to give, let me not use this keyword. I will talk about this next time, okay? So I'll simply say integer, new age, and also double new weights, and double new heights. Okay, so these are the input parameters, right? And then I want to say every time you call this constructor here, it's going to assign the attribute age to the value of new age, right? And etc. Let me write it down very quickly. Age is assigned to new age, and also nationality is assigned to, oh, actually we don't have that, sorry. And then we have weights is assigned to new weights, and also we got height is assigned to new height. Okay, that's a constructor. So now, did you notice one thing? As soon as I add in this customized constructor, my projects stop to compile. Did you notice that? How did you notice that? See, there's a red cross over here in the person tester. That means as far as the person class is concerned, we are fine. However, something that has depending on that is not happy. Because as soon as you add in your first customized constructor, Eclipse will leave you alone. The default constructor is no longer there. Okay? So now, if you go back here, you can see the way person tester use the person class is by calling the default constructor. But the default constructor is not there anymore. That's a problem. Okay? So now what should we do? We should really use this customized constructor. Let me do that quickly. Okay? So what I will do now, give me just 2 or 3 more minutes, and then I'll make a conclusion. I can say 45, 72, 1.72. And one thing to notice, you can see here, we are trying to initialize age, weights, and heights by the parameter values. But what happened to nationality? It will be below default value now. So this is a general principle. Your constructor do not necessarily have to initialize all the attributes. But whatever that's uninitialized will keep the default values. Good. Okay, let me do that quickly. Okay, so let me go back here, and then I would say for Jonathan, I'll say 62, 65, 1.81. I do want to rerun the debugger again, right? To show you this really changes. Okay, so now everything's okay. Okay, so now I want to keep the same breakpoint. I want to pause at the same point for execution. So now I'm simply just going to go back over there. I want to right-click on person tester, and then debug as Java application. So now it's going to switch to debug perspective, stopping at the same line over here, right? Line number 8. And now I still have variables Jim and Jonathan. Now tell me what changed. Yes. Yeah, you have values, right, from the argument. Very good. So now Jim and Jonathan, let me show you that, and then I'll modify the diagram to show you. Basically now Jim and Jonathan, you can see that they still have all the 4 attributes, but now it's 45 versus 62, 1.72 versus 1.81, and also now nationality uninitialized, same as Jonathan as well. Okay? So now let's go back to the diagram. Let me update this, and I'll make a conclusion, and we are done. Okay? So now let me go back here. Basically what we have done is, in the second version, for Jim, so now it's actually 45 rather than 0. It's now 72, and also it's 1.81. Okay, versus for Jonathan, it's now 62, right? You can see from here, and also 65, and also 1.81. So now again, they are still different objects. And now what's more, their attribute values are different, right? So hopefully you can see that. So now my advice to you before we see each other on Monday, okay? Now go over the slides about everything that we have seen, the example, and do start watching the tutorial if you're not feeling comfortable about Java. Okay, I'll see you on Monday.